Namaste learners, welcome to this lecture cum workshop on the theory and practice of proofreading. I am Dr. Anjana Neera Dev and I teach English at Gargi College, University of Delhi, India. So these are the 8 desired learning outcomes that I hope that this lecture and workshop will achieve. We're going to begin with the origin of the word proof. Where exactly does this word come from? And then an obvious but important question, what is proofreading? You'll wonder why the third outcome is there, but you'll discover it in the course of the lecture, the importance of grammar, the accuracy and appropriateness of the language that you use for effective communication. Why do we proofread? How do we proofread? Then we are going to look at some proofreading symbols and conventions. We will then practice proofreading step by step, and finally we will have a clean proof that is ready for publication. So when I'm thinking about proofreading, I'm thinking about what all does proofreading involve. So what is the theory of proofreading? And if you look at this little collage, you see that all the important words associated with proofreading are there. If I begin from the top left-hand corner, we have accuracy, a word I used a little while back. We have an editor. We have writing, which is the kind of communication that you are doing in your creative writing course. We have grammar, again something I mentioned. We have a document or a paper. We have something that is correct, similar to accuracy. Then we have the meaning of the word. We have the text. We have words. We have the collection of words or the lexicon of words with their meanings in a dictionary. We have spelling. We have defining terms. We have a spelling checker, right? We have language and we have definitions. And of course, since this is a creative writing in English course, we are going to focus on all that is involved when you are writing in English, and you are hoping that what you write will ultimately be published. So let's begin with the etymology of the word proof. Where does proof come from? Proof, one of the very important synonyms for proof, is evidence. You have heard that used in law courts and when there are investigations that are carried out by law enforcement agencies. It comes from 2 roots, a Latin and a French root. The Latin root, probare, means to test or prove worthy. The French root, preuve, which means evidence to establish the fact of something beyond reasonable doubt. And that is exactly how law courts use proof till today. So originally, proof is a verb. Gradually, it takes on, by the 15th century, it takes on the role of an adjective, where proof means the ability to be able to resist something. So you have fireproof, waterproof, rustproof, etc. 1808, this is when printing technology has advanced fairly well, right? 1808 is when we come across the word proof in the typographical sense. Typographical, of course, the creation of documents for printing. We come across it for the first time in 1808, and in 1878 we first encounter the word proofread to refer to the process of correcting errors in printers' proofs. All right, so the printer who would have worked by hand at that time and would have put together a draft of the manuscript that has to be published would then submit it for proofreading so that there are no errors in the final document. It's that sense of proof that we are concerned with today. Let's go back just for a minute to what else you have been doing in this course to think about the writing process. The reason I think this is important is because we need to know at what stage in the writing process proofreading enters into the process or into the game. So you begin with pre-writing, right? Then you plan, you create an outline, you write a first draft, you redraft and revise, and then you edit and proofread. Now, for many of us, the distinction between revising, editing and proofreading may not be very clear. So let's just clarify that for a minute. So let's first begin by defining very simply what we mean by proofreading. What is proofreading? Proofreading is a process. So it is the process of carefully reviewing a text for errors. What kinds of errors are these? These are what are called surface errors, errors of spelling, punctuation, grammar, formatting and typing. So I promised you a distinction between editing and proofreading. I think this graphic illustrates it really well. So when you are editing, you are removing all that is extra, all that is inappropriate, all that may be wrong with the product that you are creating. So you are using elaborate tools, and then by proofreading you are polishing it so that it is absolutely ready for publication. A further clarification that will help us to understand exactly what proofreading is. Revising is about content, style and structure. Editing is about the clarity of the language and ensuring that the intention of your story, poem, play, article, review is clearly communicated to the reader, and proofreading is primarily about grammar and spelling. So if it's about grammar and spelling, then we need to be sure that our grammar and spelling is accurate, and remember, always remember, if you are in doubt, look it up. So the importance of grammar. What are we doing when we are participating in the process of creative writing? We are communicating. When I am speaking to you, I am communicating. To communicate effectively in speech and writing, your message has to be both accurate and appropriate. Do I mean courteous when I am using the word appropriate? Yes, but only partly. Appropriate is suitable for the occasion, suitable for the audience, and suitable for the intention with which you are communicating. So, also remember that ineffective communication is very often caused by inaccuracy and inappropriateness of language. So, we have to be really careful about how we use the words that we have included in our text, and that's where proofreading becomes important. Proofreading is in many ways, as far as I am concerned, a life skill, because you realize how important it is to pause before speaking, to pause before pressing that send button on your mobile device, right, to check whether your message is accurate and appropriate or not. So proofreading will help us to make accuracy a good language habit. Since I think grammar is so important, let's do a little bit of grammar practice, right? Let's spot errors and try and correct them. So why should we proofread? right? This cartoon, I think, illustrates that really well, because here's this gentleman who has, with great effort and anticipation, applied for a job as proofreader, but in his own biodata, he had 3 typos. So, of course, the proofreading company is not, the publishing company is not likely to employ him, right? Proofreading is really, really important. This young woman, aspiring to work in a publishing house, right, visits the office, and this is what the office has outside its main door. Would you submit your manuscript to a company like that? I wouldn't. Important, yes? Oops. Okay, let's begin with the most basic kind of error that we find in our writing and the writing of others, the error of spelling. So I was puzzling over how I can identify the 10 most commonly misspelled words in English. Then I came across this really interesting survey that the India Today magazine had carried out in March 2020, March last year, yes, and according to this survey, these are the 10 words that it found, right, which are most commonly misspelled. Accommodate, separate, necessary, cemetery, definite, calendar, argument, pronunciation, millennium, and fluorescent. Okay. So that's on the left, the misspelled words, and on the right, the way in which the words should be spelled. Okay. Now, punctuation, next area of error. Next challenge after spelling is punctuation, and we often neglect punctuation because we don't notice it. We think these little commas, these little full stops, colons, semicolons, hyphens, etc. play a very, very minor role in our writing. Okay. Look at the title of this book, the cover of which I have shared with you. What does the title say to you? Eats, shoots, and leaves. Okay. Look at the little comma after the first verb. What does it indicate? What is this panda doing? So this panda has gone into a restaurant. He has had his fill of bamboo shoots or eucalyptus leaves or whatever it is that pandas like to eat. He's obviously shot everybody and then has left. What the writer actually wanted to say, perhaps, would have been said without that comma, because a panda eats shoots and leaves. If you are thinking about improving your punctuation, I can't make a better recommendation than this wonderful, wonderful book by Lynn Truss, right? I've put the URL up for you. It's available online, the book. This is my go-to guide whenever I'm in doubt about even the tiniest punctuation that I would use in my creative writing. Okay. Now, semantics and syntax. Like all other words that are specific to the context in which they are being used, let's be very clear what I mean by the word semantics and syntax. What is semantics? Semantics is very simply the meaning of words and phrases. So when you use a word or a phrase, make sure that you're using it to convey what you intend. I know that there is abundant grammar check, spell check software available for you. Do remember that it will only correct the spelling. It may give you grammar suggestions, but does the machine have the capacity to choose the appropriate synonym that you would like to use for a particular word? It hasn't. I think AI hasn't got that far yet. So you need to be very clear that of all the possible synonyms of a word, which one would you like to use in which particular context? Every grammar of every language has its own rules and conventions. What do these rules and conventions involve? The sequence in which words and phrases need to be arranged so that you make a meaningful sentence, a sentence that makes sense. Okay? That's what we mean by syntax. As far as I am concerned, the most common grammar mistake that learners make very often is the one we are going to look at on the next slide. And I have given you a little tip here, right? These are tip sheets for writing. This URL is a very useful one, and you could, in your own time when you're practicing grammar, it would be a really good idea to look at these. But the one example that I'd like to share. The most common grammar error in English is subject-verb agreement. The noun and the verb in a sentence have to agree in number and in person. Singular, plural, first, second or third person. So the books is for sale. No. The books are for sale. Yes. She goes to the market. Yes. She go to the market. No. Okay. And what's the problem with the errors here? Subject-verb agreement. So why do we proofread? Okay. You're going to go to a complaints office and of course you see that they don't know how to spell the word complaints. So that's going to be your first complaint. In all the cartoons I've shown you till now, see how important, right, appearances are, because your first impression is normally a lasting impression. And you come across something like this, you're going to be predisposed to doubt the ability of that office to solve your problem. So when you are proofreading, the first thing that you do is you make sure that your grammar, spelling, punctuation knowledge is up to the mark. And as I said, surround yourself with reference books, thesaurus, dictionary, Lynn Truss's Eat, Shoots and Leaves, whatever you can come across. Every time you are in doubt, make sure to check. Then you have to be aware of the conventions of proofreading. Proofreading uses a set of symbols in order to indicate the change that has to be made in a text to make it error-free. And you have to be vigilant and diligent so that no errors are retained in the final proof. Very briefly, I want you to look at the two types of proofs that exist in the world of printing and publishing. So we have galley proofs. Okay, that's what it looks like. That's why I included the image for you. This is the first set of proofs provided to you by a printer. This is where you can do all your corrections in great detail. Use a pen and mark as much correction as you like. And then when you come to page proofs, which is where the page numbers have been set, the margins have been laid out, the layout has been finalized, try and keep your corrections to a minimum, because it's very difficult for the publisher, because he or she or they will have to reformat the whole document again, which is why Ona Lo tells us, right? I correct them in galleys, hours and hours. I correct them, and new ones far worse multiply in page proofs. So even when you proofread the same document 3 times, every time you're going to come across an error. So make sure you do this really, really carefully. I did mention that proofreading uses symbols and conventions. That's what we're going to look at in the second part of the workshop, but I'm just giving you a glimpse into some of the symbols that are used when we are proofreading, okay, depending on the kind of correction that you want made in the galley proof. Remember, it's the galley proof in which you are making all the corrections. Okay, so these are commonly accepted, commonly understood proofreaders' marks. These are marks that are used for typographical errors. And these are marks that are used for corrections of punctuation. Right? So let's quickly revise what is it that we have done in this part of our lecture cum workshop. We have begun with the etymology of the word proof, right? We understood how it acquired the sense in which we are dealing with it today. We tried to understand proofreading not only as a process of correction, but also to see how it is different from revising and editing. We went back to the writing process in order to see how, before the manuscript goes out into the world, right, before you release it into the world, how you must edit and proofread. We then thought about why it is important for us to proofread, and I used some cartoons to help you with that. We then looked at grammar as being the most crucial skill, okay, or habit, good grammar, a habit that you must develop so that you can proofread correctly, so that you can achieve the proofreading task that you are learning to do. And in grammar, I focused on spellings, I focused on punctuation, and I focused on one type of grammar error, okay, subject-verb agreement. And then finally, we looked at how proofreading is going to be done, because that's what we're going to do in the next lecture. Proofreading is done with the help of symbols. A symbol, remember, is a sign that all of us understand as having the same meaning. So a red light is a symbol for stopping your vehicle when you are on the road. A green light is a symbol for you to proceed forward. Similarly, these proofreading symbols are a language shared by writers and printers so that they can understand each other. So rather than my writing elaborate notes on the text and say, please remove this full stop and replace it with a comma, I can use a single notation or a symbol to indicate what I want. We look forward now to actually doing some proofreading in the next lecture. Thank you.